Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Whoever is still on the go, take a seat, grab a coffee. Let's speak today. I will not lie, this is one of my favorite parts of the week or a month when I get to speak to our audience and to amazing speakers. So today I'm joined by Pedro. Pedro, hello. Just before we jump into the conversation, let me do a couple of announcements. Startup Wise Guys is in open scouting seasons for so many different verticals. So let me start counting. We have Web3, which is exactly the reason why we're here today, and I would love to speak to you about this. We have FinTech, SaaS Africa. We're looking for cybersecurity and prop tech startups. So if you're in any of the categories, please consider looking up what are the conditions and information about those scouting seasons on our website. And now today we're dedicating the full stream to the Web3, which is a hot topic on very different occasions. And I am accompanied by one of the best people to talk about the program, to talk about the vertical, and potentially answer your questions. Pedro, hello, how are you today?
Hello, Maria. It's really a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you so much to Startup Wise Guys for the invitation. To our audience, if you have anything to do with entrepreneurship, enroll. That's the message. It doesn't matter what it
Exactly.
is, enroll. If you've got a good project, enroll. If it's Web3, the better.
Exactly. And just to give you a little bit even more context, so the 3 Capital is our co-investor on this upcoming Web3 season. So we will be doing this program jointly. And I think we found a very exciting partner to do that. So Pedro, while we're starting, our audience starts commenting, hopefully, on the chats, our streams, wherever they're watching us. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you are connected to Web3?
Okay, so let's make it quick so that we can go to the interesting part. So originally, I'm an engineer by training. I guess you could describe me as an engineer that very quickly turned business. I had a career of about 30 years in enterprise IT, mostly big, mostly American multinational companies, and always revolving around business development, sales, alliances, and partnerships, and that type of thing. I was fortunate enough to have gone through most of the portfolios and the types of products that are sold in the sector, from hardware to software to services to maintenance to support to cloud, whatever. So I guess it's pretty much everything. Web3 for me as a little bit of a special place in the middle of all of this, mostly because I got to witness the very first days of internet. So back in the day, there was no browser. Still, the browser was an invention that came at a later stage. But I was actually on top of things when the internet was being cooked, so to speak. And what I see today in Web3 is deja vu all over again. So it's the same things, mainly the same problems. Who would know 20 something years or 30 years ago what the internet was good for? I mean, you could think about it, you could sort of imagine how it could change your life. You could see yourself ordering stuff online and then people would come with the physical goods and all of that. But it was a dream back then. Today it's reality. And what I see in Web3 is exactly that. So just to circle back to what I do today. So I'm a GP at 3 Capital, which is a Web3 investment fund, or venture capital fund, if you will. We're looking for good projects with utility and with a business rationale behind it, mostly. But I guess that's what everybody wants. So be careful, don't get too weird in terms of, or too far ahead of your time, because sometimes it happens. But that's what we're looking for right now, and we believe that this is another quantum leap in terms of how technology evolves. Usually, it's pretty much linear. If you look at your iPhones, you cannot tell them apart from an iPhone 12 to an iPhone 13 or 14 or whatever. But if I show you an iPhone 5 to an iPhone 14 today, then it's sort of, there's magic here. And every now and then comes something that makes our lives change, and it's sort of a quantum leap. And I firmly believe that this is where we are in terms of Web3 right now.
Absolutely. And I guess with the last couple of years, more and more people are understanding that the shift is inevitable. Now, I guess the bigger question is what is going to be a couple of first applications that are really going widespread, and then how do we adopt it into both our citizenship of the internet and on the B2B perspective. If I may, just also to discuss the background and to understand your vision of it. If we were to look at the evolution of the different versions of web, I think it's fair if I say that mostly almost everything, 99% of what you're doing is still Web 2. Even if you're discussing that, yeah, we're creating the new space for Web 3, probably the real definition of it is only coming in some years. Could you walk us through what do you see on the market of Web3 transition, Web2 transition to Web3, and also what is your investor point of view on this topic?
So I'll do better than that. I'll start with Web 1. So Web 1 was pretty much a billboard that you would put somewhere, and people will go by and would read it. Okay, so that was it. That was something that you would use to post information, and it was pretty much unidirectional. Not a lot of interaction. It was complicated back in the day. But if you wanted to post out some information, that's what you would do. You just set up a web page, and then people would somehow find it. It was not so evident, and there was no Google back in the day, but people would find it, and there would be information about there. And it could be something as simple as your university schedule or whatever, or what class you would have on that semester. But it was very, very static. Okay. Then Web 2 comes along, which is pretty much what we see today everywhere. There's interaction. It's pretty much read write, if you will. There's communication. We interact with it, but it's pretty much a walled garden experience in the sense that if you enroll on Facebook, then they own the place where you are. You conform to their rules, and you have a profile in there, which means that it's sort of that version of you for Facebook. If you decide to move somewhere else, you need to create another profile. You do not take your information with you. It's not interoperable, and that means that you can basically have the luxury of being two completely different people, one in Facebook and one in whatever. So that does pose some questions in terms of practicality and interoperability. And there's also something which is quite interesting, which is ownership. So if you believe that you own the content that you're creating, and if you do it on somebody else's house or somebody else's wall garden, the Facebook, if you will, then it's a lie. You don't own that piece of content. They do whatever they want with it. But that content was produced by you. So there's the ownership part, and there's the monetization part. Should you be paid by the content that you have produced? Probably yes. Should you be paid a lot? Well, maybe probably not, but something would come handy. And you can see this applied, for example, to newspapers. If you like somebody that writes on a newspaper every week, I mean, why not pay 1 cent or 2 cents or 3 cents for the chronicle of that person every single week? But today it's extremely difficult with this version of Web2 to go and monetize this because it costs more to process the payment than to just go and give them a cent or two or whatever. So that means that you artificially bump up the prices and then nobody opts for it because they don't see the value or they think it's too expensive. All of these things you can do in Web3 in a completely different way and a lot simpler. You can monetize it, you can have ownership of what you're doing, and it's pretty much the read, write, execute version of the web. There's a path to go from one to the other. We're right in the middle of it right now. These things do not change from one day to the other. And whenever you have these specific points in time, you have a lot of opportunity for innovation to come in. You have a lot of opportunity for intermediation. And you can take apart whatever ecosystems are built and rebuild them again. And that generates and unleashes a tremendous potential in terms of money, in terms of doing new things, and basically in terms of changing the world.
Is it fair to say that the main or one of the main points about Web3 is going to be decentralization and data ownership leveled up to the next type of interaction and type of tracking it, owning, and then using on all sorts and frontiers? Are there more complex things to this equation as well?
I just think there's one missing, which is disintermediation. So what you have today, and this is basically what happens everywhere in life, whenever you build up a value chain, you, everybody takes on their role, and as such, they become intermediaries in that value chain. So when there's radical innovation, which is what we're seeing right now in Web3, you're basically taking this whole thing apart. Think about the banking industry. So there were banks, there were retail banking, there were financial intermediaries. If you wanted to buy a stock, you needed to go through a certain path, and so on and so forth. So as these things become more democratized, simpler, or taken apart, then suddenly everybody can do this type of thing. And that basically means that it's very painful for the people that were in the value chain because suddenly they don't have a lunch anymore. It's been eaten by some other people. That's traumatic because basically you're turning all industries upside down. But it's the new way of doing things. It's very difficult for big corporations to do it on their own because usually they're so big that no matter what they do, they end up touching some sensitive point in terms of their revenue streams. So that means that they don't do things. That's why they usually go out and get startups in order to drive the innovation for them. And but it's better if you do it yourself than if you let the market disrupt you. Because if the market disrupts you, you're dead. If you do it yourself, at least you can control the damage and you can sort of see where you're heading, and you have a little bit of control on the process. So the other thing that's also relevant, it's a characteristic that comes from open source and back in the day from Linux when it was created, which is the fact that you can pile on top of other people's work. So instead of today, I'm going to build a wallet. Okay, so you can start with a blank screen and start coding away from the very beginning. and I'll see you in 2 years. So that's not how it happens, because most of the stuff that you see today is open sourced, and that basically means that you can just go and take what other people have done and build on top of that. So the development cycles can be very, very quick, and you can focus on stringing together different pieces of code that other people have done, and your secret sauce can be orchestrating the thing, and that means that you can the speed at which this thing unravels, it's out of this world.
So, how do you see some sort of adoption of the Web3? Is it going to be fully radical change, and that's the only way, or do we need to go softer about it and start trying to push for, rethinking and gradual implementation of new technologies into different industries? Do you see this happening in the next 2 years or in the next 15 years?
It's ongoing. I mean, it's always the same thing. As humans, we do not start a fresh day in the morning and do something which is completely dissociated from what we did the previous day. And there's also a migration time for doing these types of things. There's still people that don't have internet yet. There's a portion of humanity that is not on that level yet. So this will take its time. The next unlock, it's going to come from the corporate world, when the corporate world starts looking at Web3 as a tool, not because it's Web3. The corporate world is extremely ruthless and dispassionate when they look at these types of things. Does it work, and does it bring me benefit or not? So basically, corporates, what they do in order to change, there's two orders or two buckets of factors that are considered. Is it cost avoidance? In other words, is it productivity? Can you do it faster, quicker, cheaper, better, whatever? But even then, that's not really a great disruption driver, because if you have an ERP that has cost you millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars to roll out across your organization, it's not because somebody comes along and says that they're going to do it 20% faster that you're going to change. The amount of investment that you have sunk in there does not allow you to take that sort of decisions. You can say that's fine. We understand that we don't have the perfect solution, but guess what? It works and it's rolling, and people know how to use it. So yeah, maybe if you could suddenly sell us something that would double our productivity, we could think about it in a different way. Um, on the other hand, the other bucket, which is usually the one that drives these types of decisions, it's value creation. And under value creation, this is either top line growth, so that means more sales. Basically, that's what it boils down to. And the more sales can come from different places in the value chain. So you can have better products, you can improve your margin, you can have new products, you can have a new business model. So the possibilities are countless. And this is highly connected to marketing as well, in the sense that there's always, by definition, a disconnect in between the several generations that take over as time goes by. What the boomers think has nothing to do with Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen whatever today. And most of what used to work in the past does not work today. And when big corporations that have businesses that are mostly B2C or that depend a lot on building up the brand and the awareness so that people go and buy, when they look at the younger generations, they don't see them. And this is extremely scary for them. because if people don't know what Nike is, how do you expect all the youngsters that are now coming into the market and are starting to work to go and buy a pair of Nikes? So suddenly, all the money that you poured into building up the brand in the past 50 years, gone, because nobody knows what this brand is. So when you get more innovation in, you're typically talking to younger audiences in a language that they understand, and this is extremely powerful because suddenly you have a whole new way of doing marketing. You have a whole new way of doing loyalty programs and all these types of things, and generating more engagement, which ultimately increase your top line. So that's how the thing goes.
No, I fully agree, and I think we will see even more uh, change and innovation brought by this industry into the communication with different audiences from here and on. They have disrupted already a lot of different things, and yeah, it's interesting to see. I think that I would like to switch to the topic of investments, if you
Mhm.
don't mind. And the first question will be very, very simple. What are you looking for in a startup in order for you to consider to invest in them? In Web3, of course.
It doesn't change. It's regardless of the vertical. Um, so there's a couple of things which are really important, and sometimes I'm a bit surprised that people standing on the other side of the table don't think through this. Um, the single most important thing, it's the team. Uh, can the team do it or not? Okay, is this the right team to do it or not really? Do these people work well together? Do these people reduce the risk, let's say, of executing this idea or not really? And I'm coming from a place where the idea is good, okay? Because if the idea is not good, then none of this conversation matters, okay? The problem is that sometimes it's very difficult to understand if the idea is good or not, okay? And let me go into the definition of good. So in order for this to be a business, it needs to scale non-linearly, okay? A startup business, I mean, if you have a restaurant, you can scale linearly, and that's absolutely fine, or a services business. But if you want to look at a business as a startup, it needs to scale in a non-linear fashion. So that means that you leverage your growth through technology, which means that you'll go through the desert in the beginning, and then suddenly God appears in front of you, and you do a hockey stick, and you start selling like crazy. Okay, so this is the definition of a startup, and a good idea. A good idea might come before its time. And in that sense, it's a good idea that came before its time. So, in other words, it's no good. It's not going anywhere. So, timing the thing in terms of, oh, this idea looks cool. I think this is going to be needed in the near future. The question always becomes how near. I mean, is it in 3 years? If it's in 3 years, you need to find a way to survive 3 years until the market actually starts buying it. Um, if it's today, then you're already late because you need to build a product. So the art is finding a good idea that people are going to want tomorrow, so that today you can go out and string it together and then run with it. And then the other part is, are these the right people to do it? Because sometimes people come around and say, no, 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 my idea is extremely revolutionary. Fantastic. We could sit down here, all of us and the people on the webinar as well. And we could come up in 5 minutes with so many fantastic ideas. So the trick is in the execution. Good ideas, how many do you want? Having the grit and the will to go through things and execute them and make it happen and then sell it to customers at the end, that's the real trick of it. And it's mostly execution risk. And in order to do it, it does not work if you have a 9 to 5 job or if you're too worried about other things. I mean, it's really, really difficult and grueling in the beginning. You need to sacrifice a lot so that you're in the middle of the desert and suddenly God materializes in front of you, and then there it goes.
The main summary is meet the God so that you go from the linear to hockey stick growth. I like it. All right, I will open one of the questions that I see from the chat, but this is my cue to say to the audience, hey, we're looking at your comments. If you want to ask us anything, this is your sign to do that. So Zana is asking, what are the key factors that you believe contribute to the success of the Web3 startups, and how do you evaluate potential investments in this space? I think second part we're more or less covered, but let's go to the first one.
Well, the first one is easy. It's the strategy, and it's mainly the go-to-market strategy. So there's so many projects where you see people building really cool stuff, but then it gets to where are you going to get your customers? And the answer is they will come. Or it's the community, bro. You know nothing about this. Let me break it to you gently. It's not. It's not the community, and a customer is a customer at the end of the day. You might get to that customer or you might talk to that customer in a different language. But at the end of the day, it's still a customer, which will have a need, an unmet need, that, by the way, your product is fulfilling. Okay. So how to speak, to get, to attract, to create a pipeline, put whatever word you want to put in there, how to sell it, it's absolutely critical. You can have the best product in the world, that at the end of the day, if you're not able to sell it, you're done.
Exactly right. Also in Web3, a big difference makes the community you're building around your product. And this is probably one of the front running tools for marketing right now in Web3 space. Now I'm bringing the question from Davide. Thank you so much for asking. Can you provide some examples of real world use cases where Web3 technologies are already making a significant impact? And what are the potential benefits that they bring to various industries?
Oh, we could be here until the end of the day, if you want. There's so many business cases. Um, let's start with financial services. So one of the reasons why there's so many fintechs and so much innovation floating around financial services is the fact that it's a very, or it was, let me put it like that, a very regulated and strict activity. And guess what? If you wanted to have a bank, you needed to have a lot of money, and you needed to have a lot of patience to go through with your local regulator to fulfill all the paperwork that they asked from you, and to make sure that you understood all the rules. Okay, but today you can do that in a very simple way. Let's put it like that, and you can gather the community around it. So suddenly, it's not like you can be a banker; it's like the community can be a banker. Okay, uh, to some extent unregulated. That is true, but we will get there, and very quickly. But the potential for disruption in this industry, it's incredible. If you believe what you see there, most of the stuff that we do in terms of transactions, if not all of it, is based on trust. So if I want to sell something to Mariia here, Mariia wants to understand if what she's buying is legit or not. and I want, or if she will have problems with it or not. And I want to know in advance if Maria has the money to pay me, and if she's going to pay me, and if the transaction is going to go smoothly. So there's this problem of trust, that to a great extent you can solve, for example, with a blockchain, because then it becomes a single source of truth. And if that is the case, then suddenly, boom, all the escrows and all the intermediaries that you used to use in the old paradigm, you don't need them anymore. So there's an example of how you can make this happen. Another quick one, because this one is coming. It's not here yet. There's still a few things that need to happen, but there's another one which is coming very, very quickly, which is healthcare. So something so simple as medical records. If you go from one hospital to another, and if you did an X-ray in the other hospital, how can they in the new hospital check the X-ray that you did in the other one, and how can you have control over this? How can you make this happen and only assure that the right people take a look at your medical records and not everybody else? So this is again another use case where blockchain, as a single source of truth technology, can be very interesting.
I guess one of the ways that I see it is that Web3 is more of the infrastructure. You can build so many different things on top of it, but the way how we're interacting as a society, commercial society or digital society, whatever is the paradigm you're taking into account, I think this is just providing the new level of tools and new level of interactions that we just yet don't explore, but it's inevitable that we're going to be transferring to more transparent or more secure ways of collaborating and making transactions on all
I'll,
sorts of
I'll,
ways.
I'll give you another one, Maria, which does not have to do directly with infrastructure. Identity. How can I prove that it's me, and how can you prove that it's you on that side? So these are simple things and are pretty much universal. I mean, if I can demonstrate that I am who I say I am, then again, this introduces a lot of trust in the system. And then suddenly people can look at me in a different way.
Absolutely. I also have a question regarding B2B versus B2C. Does B2B Web3 even exist, or is it just a utilization of the tools that are anyways working with B2C audience?
Oh, it exists, and it's very, very big. and and that's what, by the way, that's what's going to drive adoption in the mass market. Because if you look at what happens today, there's around 400 million wallets, something like that, in that neighborhood. And if you take it for as a proxy for the number of Web3 users, which is not such a good proxy, but that's what people usually accept as not being so much off. Um, if you look back into what's still to come, and if you go and find the point in time where you had 400 million internet users, that would put you around 97 or 98. Google was founded in 97, so there's so much to go, and we're still in the very early days. And there's this tipping point in terms of adoption, which is okay. So you've got 400 million people that are really happy because they know what Web3 is and are using it on a daily basis. How does this 400 million go into 4 billion at least, which is half of mankind? You need help. And that help is going to come from the big marketing budgets of the big organizations. And that's what's going to drive the next cycle of adoption and widespread. You might not see it as Web3 labeled, which there's quite a few experiments going on today where companies are launching loyalty programs, for example, but they don't tell you it's with NFTs, or they don't tell you that it's Web3 or whatever. It's just digital collectibles or digital stamps or whatever they can come up with, so that they don't scare people away. But there's so much to happen on that space that the possibilities are mind blowing.
Great, great. Thank you. And I think for the closing of today's stream, I would like to ask a very generic, maybe, but also very subjective to your opinion question about investments in the Web3 space. So, what do you see? Do you see the tendencies of more and more funds to be actually allocated towards the Web3 startups? How do you see the trends, the tendency? Are all the news with generative AI and, for example, advances with Apple Vision Pro, are all of those contributing to more and more funds channeled into the space?
So VCs and investors, they sort of become affiliated with a certain sector, if you will, either because it's where they spent a significant portion of their life, or it's because it's what they know, or where they feel comfortable, or whatever. But they're not the best people to do technical due diligence. If suddenly you go around and ask how many VCs know how to code, you would be surprised. Much in the same way, if you went around and asked how many VCs have sold consumer goods in the past, you would be surprised as well. So you do not have to be an expert on the segment. You need to understand how it works, and you need to know business and how things go. The sector itself is something which is more debatable if you actually need to have a subject matter expertise in there. You don't if you have somebody in the team that does, for example. But what's coming here is the fact that VCs follow the money and follow, or better said, they follow the returns or the potential of the returns. And that's a nicer way to put it, the promise of the returns. And it really does not matter to a significant amount of people if it's in Web3 or Web24 or AI or whatever. And what you're seeing today, mostly with AI, for example, is that things are not hermetic in the sense that, oh, this is Web3, get away from here if you don't belong to the tribe. No, things are more fluid, and there's a lot of common points in between artificial intelligence and AI, and I hesitate to say it, the metaverse, because that would send us down in another rant. But let's call it augmented reality or whatever. So different human interfaces. That's the way that I like to see it. So all of these things sort of become intertwined, and they leverage upon each other. And what you have today is a community of investors which is doing this path already. They're educating themselves in terms of understanding what the next big thing is going to be. And as they study and as they look at projects and startups, and they become more aware and more familiar and more comfortable with these types of things, you see the investment growing up. Simple as that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you for everyone to listening in to us. I had an amazing time. Thank you for your answers. We have 5 seasons open. So if you are in Web3, please apply to our accelerator program. We're investing and working with the best startups in the field. We're looking for early stage teams worldwide. And apart from Web3, we also have FinTech, SaaS Africa, cybersecurity, and PropTech verticals open. So if you identify yourself in any of these or interested to learn more, please get in touch. Pedro, thank you so much. And I hope you and all of our viewers have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Maria, and Startup Wise guys for the invitation. To you that's seeing us or listening to us, get up and enroll now, now, please. Don't just stand there. Thank you so much.
Thanks.